Oliver and Company, A Goofy Movie, The Great Mouse Detective, Howl's Moving Castle. Animation is literally just too big and too expansive. I think it's important we look at the media we consumed as younger people, as adults, to properly gauge what we should be carrying forward with us, and what we should never show to children again.
So I grew up in a conservative, religious, not so wealthy household. Saturday morning cartoons were just not a thing. The only real cartoons my sister and I really watched were Disney films. I can't remember how many times we watched The Lion King and Pocahontas and Beauty and the Beast and that one sing-along tape.
Is everybody ready?
To sing along!
With Disney songs!
But there were rules about what we could watch. Obviously, no sex, no extreme violence, no swearing, etc. If you squinted, you could see a tiny asterisk on each one of these. But there was also this rule, sort of, that stuff with too much magic or anything was inappropriate, even kinda dangerous. I remember watching the previews for some movie, which included a trailer for Hayao Miyazaki's Kiki's Delivery Service, which features a young witch trainee who rides on a broomstick, presumably making deliveries. I still haven't watched it, and there was always some audible grunt or outcry from the parents in the room as they hit the fast forward button on the remote. Eventually, as our tastes began to include films like Willow and Lord of the Rings, the rule sort of morphed so that what was most important was that the story emphasized the absoluteness of good and evil. So the inclusion of witchcraft or magic or whatever was fine as long as there was a clear demarcation between quote-unquote good magic and quote-unquote evil magic. But witchcraft ought always to be on the evil side, so Harry Potter was right out. I remember when Harry Potter was starting to be made into movies and stuff, and our church pastor lent us a video called Harry Potter Witchcraft Repackaged with the subtitle, Making Evil Look Innocent.
Over half of all children between the ages of 6 and 17 have read at least one Harry Potter book, with thousands reporting multiple readings of all of the books. While many parents are thrilled by the prospect of their children taking an interest in reading, other parents and educators view Harry Potter as the latest tool being used to disciple children into the darkest aspects of black magic.
Fiction was taken pretty seriously growing up. There were rules about the morals of the story. These rules were flexible, even contradictory at times, but the decision to watch movies always included this sort of moral calculation. For as conservative as this situation was, it's kind of amazing that when I consider what animated films I learned the most from growing up, I keep coming back to that Shakespearean cross-dressing feminist masterpiece. When did I see Disney's Mulan? The film was released in 1998, but I remember seeing it after it was on VHS, so I was probably about 10 years old, just a budding little dude. The story opens with the Great Wall of medieval, apparently extremely patriarchal China, where Shan Yu, leader of the Huns, i.e. a stereotyped horde of one-dimensional, dark-skinned foreigners out for the blood of the innocent, that's not racist, has invaded China because out for blood? Fa Mulan is a super smart and kind young woman, the only child of Fa Zhu, a disabled veteran, and Fa Li, his narratively uninteresting wife, and when we meet her, she's about to join a bunch of local women to go meet the matchmaker, where things go horribly wrong because she's a great human with a big heart being amazing. She's just not comfortable or able to maneuver, literally and figuratively, in the trappings, both literal and figural, of the expectations for women. Anyway, afterward there's a draft of every dude to go fight because of the Huns, and this happens.
Please, sir, my father has already fought for
Silence! You would do well to teach your daughter to hold her tongue in a man's presence.
Mulan, You dishonor me.
Cue the synth. Mulan decides to take her father's place, cutting her hair and posing as a man in order to do so. Meanwhile, the ghosts of the Fa family ancestors send Mushu, a tiny red dragon with a spotty track record of protecting the Fa family, to wake up the great stone dragon to help protect and guide Mulan, except Mushu accidentally breaks the statue and goes in its place. Mushu finds Mulan and basically proposes to help her to be more convincingly masculine with such advice as,
Shoulders back, chest high, feet apart, head up, and punch him is how men say hello.
while Mulan just wants to survive, Mushu wants Mulan to achieve glory as a warrior in order to get his own prestige back upon return. Hijinks ensue.
I've got a name. And it's a boy's name, too.
Ling, how about Ling?
His name is Ling.
I didn't ask for his name. I asked for yours.
Try Chu.
Achoo.
Achu.
Gesundheit. I killed myself.
Mushu.
Mushu?
No,
Then what is it?
Ping. Ping was my best friend growing up.
it's Ping.
Ping.
Because Ping did steal my...
Yes, my name is Ping.
Hey, Ping!
Oh, hi, guys. I didn't know you were here.
Mushu forges deployment orders entirely in order to achieve his own selfish ends, and the army moves out, only to find that Shang's father, the general, has been totally defeated, and the Huns are moving toward the emperor. A battle ensues. Mulan saves the day by slaughtering hundreds of people in an avalanche. Wow, Disney, what in the world? Anyway, Mulan gets injured by the big bad Shan Yu, and her injury reveals that she's a woman! Oh no, I can't like you anymore. What a horrible lie. Ah, the penalty is death. Ah, okay, I'll spare you because you saved my life, but I don't like you anymore. Ugh. The other soldiers go down to the Imperial City, and Mulan starts to go home. Mushu apologizes for his selfishness. Shan Yu and his cronies somehow pop out of their graves, proving beyond a shadow of a doubt that they are, in fact, vampires. Mulan goes down to try to warn everyone, but she's a woman now, so no one listens to her. Until the Huns, who are definitely vampires, capture the Emperor, and then everyone's like, oh, she was right! Saving the day involves cross-dressing and making sexual advances on the vampires, doing awesome fight skills, and finally defeating Shan Yu in what is definitely not a metaphor of female sexual empowerment.
It looks like you're out of ideas.
Not quite.
So they totally blew up Shan Yu, but don't worry kids, he's not really dead because he's definitely a vampire. The Emperor offers Mulan a job, she turns it down, and returns to her father, who totally could care less about the glory and the trophies of the vampires she killed because he just really missed her. Oh, and then Shang shows up and talks like a 12-year-old.
Mulan. You forgot your helmet. Well, actually, it's, your helmet, isn't it? I mean...
So, where's the lessons? So it had actually been a while since I'd watched this, and now that I have again, I'll tell you what's going on. Despite its female lead, Mulan is less about deconstructing femininity, and more about deconstructing masculinity. In other words, it's more about
Ping.
than it is about
Mulan.
This is what you give me to work with? Well, honey, I've seen worse. We're gonna turn this sow's ear into a silk purse.
It's freezing.
Okay, let's set the stage a little by talking about how Mulan sort of brilliantly depicts the ties between sex, gender, and the state. But first, let's define this. So some quick definitions. Sex describes biology. Gender describes how people behave relative to their sex. So female, male, and intersex are words describing biology, and feminine, masculine, non-binary, etc. are words describing how someone presents themselves and acts within, through, and against cultural expectations and signifiers relating to people's sexual biology. This lets us talk about the different ways people express their gender and how biology, power, divergent knowledges, ideology, and language come together in an arena of symbol, struggle, and generativity. Okay? Okay, back to the show. The opening song Honor to Us All is sung by all the main characters as Mulan prepares for her doomed visit to the very scary matchmaker to basically take the entrance exams to being the perfect bride, which she fails because she actually cares. A song which not only introduces the characters, but also the gender politics of the narrative world. Namely, oof, that's dark. Philosopher Tom Digby talks a lot about this sort of thing in his book Love and War. CF my video on chivalry. The point being basically that gender norms functioning within a culture that relies on militarism, which is basically the whole conceit of the film, distort what it means to be a human being in relation with other human beings, and particularly what it means to be a woman or a man relating to other genders. This plays out in Mulan in sort of two ways, tying together the symbols of gender and the state with the symbol of the family. So you got the emperor as this sort of patriarch, a father figure to the nation. He's like a grandpa and stands in a sort of analogical relation to grandmother Fa. One way they're analogs of each other, for example, is that they use their familial power knowledge to provide sexual guidance to the ostensible heterosexual pairing at the end of the film.
You don't meet a girl like that every dynasty.
Would you like to stay for dinner?
Would you like to stay forever?
Like in the song, gender roles have a family dimension, e.g. bearing sons, and they have a political dimension, e.g. those sons exist to bear arms for the empire. The Fa family is a sort of miniature of the state as a whole, with gender playing a big role in each side of it. And militarism, with the various codes of honor and shame that go with it, is kind of the glue binding all those parts together. But it ain't super glue, if you know what I mean.
All the world's a stage, and all the men and women merely players. They have their exits and their entrances, and one man in his time plays many parts.
Shakespeare and his best buds definitely knew back in the Renaissance that gender is a performance. According to Phyllis Racken, the plots of a whopping 1 in 5 of Shakespeare's 38 known plays involve gender swapping, often a woman performing a dude, and its essential conceit in 3 of his plays. Racken also cites a source that counts at least 80 different plays from the period, whose stories involve gender swapping like this. And in that sense, Mulan as a film is sort of a Shakespearean comedy when it comes down to it. One big difference between Mulan and, say, As You Like It, is that Mulan, surprisingly for a Disney movie, doesn't put so much emphasis on a romantic plot. More on that later. But still, the story revolves around a series of gender performances on the part of Mulan, whose persuasiveness and unpersuasiveness poke holes in the performances of those around her. The story begins with Mulan's unpersuasive performance of extreme femininity with the matchmaker. This is a dramaturgical struggle, down to makeup, costume, choreography, recitation. And I don't know, I feel like we can call the tea pouring section a kind of micro-acrobatics? So like, Mulan is definitely unconvincing, but like, she's still definitely a woman. Here's the thing, her dramaturgical failure isn't in being biologically, ontologically a woman. It's in being marriageable.
You are a disgrace! You may look like a bride, but you will never bring your family honor!
The point is that being a woman and being marriageable are, in this context, seen as the same thing. But Mulan's failure proves implicitly that this is bogus. There's nothing natural about anything she's asked to do, obviously. And also, you'll notice I said that she failed in a performance of extreme femininity. Look at Mama Fa. Look at Grandma Fa. They're not made up. In this whole scene with the song and the performance and the aftermath, where are the marriageable men, huh? Olds. Youngs. Oh, there's one single dude, there he is. Maybe it's not about romance. Maybe it's about power and hierarchy. I mean, the stakes for all this is this thing called honor, which in this movie can be basically summed up as what you've got when you're socially recognized as having played your role according to all the political, cultural, and moral norms. The opposite is shame, which is what's at stake both here with the matchmaker and with the dudes.
Oh, hi, guys. I didn't know you were here.
Most of the movie follows Mulan's second tendentious performance of gender, this time of masculinity. But again, it's in its extreme form. Mushu, of course, tries to give Mulan the stage directions belonging to an imaginary dude bro.
I don't think I can do this.
It's all attitude. Be tough like this guy here.
What are you looking at?
Punch him.
What's awesome about this movie is that it sets up the matchmaker scene and the drill camp scenes as being analogous to each other. Both men and women are being asked to perform something unnatural, toxic, a set of norms that alienate people from their own desires and from other people.
No time to talk. Now remember, it's your first day of training, so listen to your teacher and no fighting. Play nice with the other kids, unless, of course, one of the other kids want to fight. Then you have to kick the other kid's butt.
But I don't want to kick the other kid's butt.
And of course, the thing with militant masculinity is that it holds itself together with a strong dose of misogyny.
You would do well to teach your daughter to hold her tongue in a man's presence.
Did they send me daughters when I asked for sons?
Stand watch, Mushu, while I blow our secret with my stupid girly habits.
Hygiene.
And I am Yao, King of the Rock. And there's nothing you girls can do about it.
I knew there was something wrong with you.
A woman!
Treacherous snake.
No one will listen.
Huh? Oh, I'm sorry. Did you say something?
Mushu.
Hey, you're a girl again, remember?
Stand aside! That creature's not worth protecting.
She's a hero.
She's a woman. She'll never be worth anything.
Listen, you pompous.
Whew, okay, so eventually Mulan's performance becomes unconvincing, as is clear from Chifu Jerkface.
A woman!
Which brings us to the men's performances of masculinity, because, I mean, Chifu is really massaged, but he's sort of in the middle when it comes to the way he performs gender codes.
You men owe me a new pair of slippers! And I do not squeal like a girl.
Ditto for Chen Po, who is much more in touch with the side of his personality that would be associated with femininity in this context.
Yao, relax and chant with me. Feel better?
And all three of the friends, Ling, Yao, and Chen Po, all of them insecure about and in tension with their various masculinities, have no problem by the end of the film changing their gender performance to dress in drag to help Mulan save the Emperor. And they're pretty persuasive, I might add. On the other hand, Shang is fairly consistent and resistant to change, even as these others embrace their gender slippage. He's kind of boring, to be honest.
You fight good.
What's interesting is Mulan's dad, Fa Zhu. First of all, he takes Mulan's failure with the matchmaker totally well, like, no judgment.
What beautiful blossoms we have this year. But look, this one's late. But I'll bet that when it blooms, it will be the most beautiful of all.
But at the same time, he's pretty invested in this honor-shame dynamic.
So you'll die for honor.
I will die doing what's right.
But if you...
I know my place. It is time you learned yours.
But the ending shows that just like the other men in this movie, he holds his masculinity in a kind of tension. Mulan wins, the Emperor offers her a job, and she's like,
I think I've been away from home long enough.
And you're like, what? She's rejecting female empowerment for her family? And then you realize she's actually rejecting the patriarchal military state in favor of the humans she cares about the most. Oh, she's good. Anyway, Mulan comes home worried that her dad's shame will make him angry with her. So in another performance, because I don't think she really cares about this stuff, she appeals to that honor dynamic with patriarchal honorific symbols. Shan Yu's sword, the Emperor's medal, a discourse of obeisance, etc. But like, Zhu doesn't care either. He gets it.
The greatest gift and honor is having you for a daughter. I've missed you so.
I've missed you too, Baba.
Which finally brings us to...
When will my reflection show who I
So the plot is framed by two images of the blossoming flower.
But look, this one's late. But I'll bet that when it blooms, it will be the most beautiful of all.
The flower that blooms in adversity is the most rare and beautiful of all.
Obviously, the blossom image is a metaphor for human becoming, but each statement implies something different about what that becoming is like. I think Zhu's statement about the blossom is an ontological one, whereas the Emperor's statement about the blossom is an ethical one. Obviously, I'm about to get a little philosophical, so first let's... Ontological, derived from the Greek word for being, means having to do with being and becoming and what being's relationship is to non-being, stuff like that. The word ethical is often used to refer to rules and norms, but more broadly it can refer to the sphere in which people do things and make choices among other people who are likewise doing things and making choices. You have to assume that's going on in order to talk about ethics, which asks, what is the right thing to do? Okay, back to the show. So, Zhu's saying implies that people have an essence that eventually blooms or comes out on its own. It's part of your becoming. But the Emperor's saying implies that blooming is a choice, something you do in the realm of ethics. Zhu's saying is actually more true of Mulan's male companions than for her. They're the ones who bloom late in the film, having embraced the tendentiousness of their gender, something that's obviously there from the beginning, even if they don't admit it. But Mulan's the one who, by acting through the limitations, edicts, and violence of the men around her, she affirms herself as someone for whom gender is only partly what identifies her. Both ways of thinking, ontology and ethics, being and action, are tied up with ideas about sex and gender, but differently. Throughout the film, they're in tension with one another. As a woman, Mulan is both subjected into being a certain way, ontology, and expected to behave accordingly, ethics. The same thing goes for the men. The work of the film is to deconstruct how duty, in the film world and in our world, is understood as the product of ontology plus ethics, being plus what you're supposed to do with that being, when really it's something we use to justify the way things are and to manage women's bodies on the one hand and men's emotional lives on the other. Mulan defies both her family's and the state's ontological demands, her sex, and their ethical demands, her gender, not to create some brand new idea of duty, but maybe a renewed duty based on human worth grounded in familial love rather than on the honor-shame dynamic associated with toxic masculinity, militarism, and state power. Speaking of love, it's interesting that in Mulan, the erotic relationship between Mulan and Shang is never consummated, only suggested as possible. Shang, after all, has a hard time seeing either Ping or Mulan as a fully human person, and he's the stiffest gendered character of the whole gang, to the point that when he comes to court Mulan in the end, he's super awkward about it. Like, now that Mulan is a girl, that means he has to court her? Does that mean he liked her when she was Ping? Does he even love her, or is he just being a good boy following the Emperor's advice? Which is worse? Ugh. But this de-emphasis on romance helps the film to avoid the sorts of problems we see with, say, 2017's Wonder Woman, where the erotic, which is always a particular concern with one person, overshadows her ostensible concern for humanity as a whole. If you're unconvinced, link in the doobly-doo to an essay I wrote on this topic a while back. It's funny to me that I gravitated toward Mulan when I was trying to think of the animated movies that taught me the most growing up. Like I said before, it's weird that this movie was so popular in our conservative household. I guess it just goes to show the inconsistencies of conservatism in practice. Nowadays, as an adult, it sticks out in my mind. I'm in a place right now, have been for a couple years, where almost everything I used to take for granted about myself, what I believe, what I want out of life, is in question. Each thing a new, uncertain knot in the string to negotiate and untie. Part of that is negotiating the flow of my own gender and reckoning with not fitting or wanting the kind of masculinity I inherited. In the house I grew up in, feminism was kind of a dirty word, and watching Mulan didn't make me a feminist just by watching it, but I don't know, maybe it taught me in a small way and indirectly something I wouldn't realize for real until many years later, as a suspicious but earnest college student, and now, as a man having a crisis of identity in a patriarchal world. Something radical, something deceptively simple, but with extremely complicated implications. Gender isn't something you are. It's something you do. Whoa, hold up. How does fiction teach us anything? To say that a work of fiction teaches us anything is to make an interesting claim about the purpose of made-up strings of language and symbols. It claims that fiction functions on some level other than entertainment, for example, on some level other than moving characters through plot points for some emotional effect. You might be saying, no duh, but I have questions. How can we talk about fiction having a moral function? For fiction to be moral, does that mean it has to be somehow accurate to some set of real-world facts? But what does that mean for a made-up artwork? And whether or not it's moral or accurate or whatever, does it make sense as readers to make moral judgments about fiction? If fiction has a moral function, what's the upshot even? Does fiction have effects in the world? Over the next few videos, I hope to explore these questions and figure out some answers. Stay tuned.